These two guys in Sydney bootstrapped their first business.
My name's Frank Reef. I co-founded a business and sold it for $180 million.
And built the product for about 5 years and really didn't understand, what product market fit was and how to run that business to a certain point to be able to take it to market and be able to sell that product, right? So, they speak a lot about sales.
I thought I knew how to sell things. There's a very particular strategy, process, and timeline that you have to follow to sell a business. I made someone $2 million commission by selling our business.
And what they didn't realize is that they had this great idea for a product, which is a tech product, but they didn't identify who their customer was and how they were going to sell it. So they ran into this market, which is cool, and I think a lot of founders do that. Just two young guys just trying to figure it out, but they didn't pre-think about where their market would be and identify the market cap, like who's interested in it, why would they use it, how long would they use it for, what should they charge? They didn't do any of that research. So I think it's pretty critical to do that. That's one of the first things you should think about. How big is the market? So what's the market cap of the product that you're building and who will you sell it to, and identifying who those customers are. They did not do that. Like spending 5 years to build a product and not really monetize it is pretty dangerous. Most people run out of money in one. Look, I'm assuming that they were working their day jobs and doing this in the evening, but all it tells me is that it's just going to take you twice as long to get there. So that's probably not a good idea. So sales. So if you're going to sell a business, build a business, you should think about who your customer is and who your client is. Is it a B2C or B2B element? And how are you going to market the product to it? How are you going to market the product to those customers? I think that's pretty critical. So write that down on paper. It should form part of your business plan. It's one of the probably main strategies, because if you go to raise money on a business and you can't identify who your customer is, what the value of the product is, and what the LTV is, the lifetime value, and what the reoccurring revenue is, right? What your ARR is, no investor is going to invest in you. It's just plain and simple. So we're going through that process now. I'm going through that process with a new tech company that we've just founded, and trying to figure all of that stuff out.
We're going to do what we call the hearts and minds campaign.
That was weird. Do not put that off, because that may tell you that you might need to pivot. It also might tell you that you've got a really bad idea, you won't be able to sell it. And then you figured out, we have to sell it for X amount because this is how much it's going to cost. That's not going to work. Is it going to be a subscription model? That's not going to work. Do we sell it to corporations? That will work. Consumers? That won't work. So then you can build it out from there. But you've got to get the framework for sales organized. And I think that's pretty critical. Okay, pitch deck. So the guys are talking about the pitch deck, right?
About pitching. One of the key things to understand here is when you're sitting across the table, the person who is hearing about your business, it could be the first time they've ever heard it. They have no idea who you are. They have no idea about your business. And so you have to understand, you've got to, sell with absolute conviction what you do. But here's the key that I got wrong. When I first started pitching to potential acquirers, I was talking all about us.
Well, the first thing you got to focus on, what problem are you trying to solve? You must be solving a problem. There's no point in building a business around something that does not have a problem, a market that does not have a problem. So what sort of problem are you trying to solve? And really, really breaking that down. And the next thing is what makes you an expert for you to be able to fix that product? You have to think about that, because that's a question that any potential investor is going to ask you. Well, why should I invest in you? What do you know about this? So for us, as we go to build our cap table and go to the market, I've been doing this for 10 years, right? And I know it intimately. I've been the CEO and the founder inside that market and built a multi-million-dollar company out. So I know all the ups and the downs, the pros and the cons, and I know what's wrong with the market. I'm very intimately connected to it. So, I can sit in a room, in a boardroom, and pitch a slide deck to a bunch of potential investors and do it with such confidence that there isn't a question they couldn't ask me that I wouldn't be able to answer. In a way that they would want to hear it, right? So you've got to think about that. If you're going to build a business and you're looking to raise funds for that business, what I'm learning is that in that pitch deck, by the way, you'd have a long form, a medium, and a short form for that. But if you walk into a room with a bunch of investors, they'll be pretty brutal. So if you don't know how to respond and how to handle that sort of pressure, you might not be the right person in that company doing the pitch, right? So try and figure that out. I think you should spend quite a bit of time on it. Actually, this weekend, I'm spending 2 days just locked in a room, finalizing and refining my pitch. And how do I do that? So I write down all the potential buyers that would be in the room. I write down all the potential questions that they would ask me, and I just stuff them there. Just those two simple things. the questions they're going to ask are going to be directly related to the result. So, what's your P&L look like? How much is it going to cost? Who is your talent? How do you retain the talent? What's your strategy around that? How much money are you going to make? When are you going to make it? And when am I going to get my money back? These are all the sorts of things potential investors will ask you, whether they're VCs or angels. So you've got to be ready for those questions. Some of them are quite curvy, like there could be some tough questions in that. The ones that I put down were pretty tough because I want to go in there with them asking me the hardest questions possible because I don't want to be Bambi walking through the forest, right? So I'm sort of getting prepared for that now. There's a lot of work in it, I think, personally. I think if you don't put the work in, the pitch is going to be bad. You should pitch in front of a whole bunch of people if you can. You can start with your partner first or whatever that looks like, people in your office. But then you should do some practice pitches, which is what I'm probably looking to do with I think we've got a meeting booked in with a VC just to go and pitch and have that person critique us. I don't think they're an investor. They're not the right investor for us. But it's probably worth doing. Okay, who's the buyer, right? Identifying who the buyer is.
Potential buyers, who are the probably 3 parties you're going to take through to start doing the intensive due diligence.
I've struggled with this a little bit as we go through our journey to raise funds. By the way, our Series A or our round 1 or whatever you want to call it is a small number. I think we're going to raise $3 to $5 million in our first auction. And I've got to figure out who the buyer is. And the things that I think about are, is the buyer in the first round the same buyer in the third round? Or the second round, and then we have to escalate it to a different type of investor in round 3? Do we do 3 rounds or do we only do 2? I know that $3 to $5 million is not going to be enough to get the full suite of products that we're trying to build to the market with product market fit. I don't think so. I think $3 to $5 million gets us started on one particular product in the suite of products we're looking to build in that sort of vertical vet sector market. So we'll have to go and raise another 10 or 15 and then maybe another 25, right? So it's probably around a $50 million fundraise. Doing it over 3 stages, the advice that I'm getting is that's probably the right thing to do. I think if we can lock in one buyer who's an angel, who can provide advice, sit on the board, connect us to individuals who would purchase the product, and really be involved intimately in the build of the product, I think is probably the right investor for us. So that's the investor we've identified that we want. So we're starting off in that construction sector and vocational education and training in Australia, right? So we're looking for somebody in that space who's passionately connected to it. We think that that's a win-win for us. They could become a potential client, so that's a bit of a tip. We can maybe generate a great client, corporate client off the back of that. They get to understand how we operate. We build trust and confidence through that relationship. And then they also sit on the board in our tech company and are an investor, so they want us to succeed, right? And if they're highly successful, they'll be able to provide us with advice on that journey, as we go through that process. And maybe they invest in a whole bunch of other investments, and there's all these connections that we can make. So we think that's who our investor is. So I think you need to identify who that person is and spend time talking about it and documenting that in your business plan as well. And I think otherwise you're just going to waste time pitching to people who are just not connected to it and who don't understand it. I wrote it down into the first document, which is a very long form document, about 50 pages. And I gave it to someone and he goes, I have no fucking idea what this is. So I really overcomplicated it though, but I sort of learned to simplify, get to the point, and then that helped me really identify who the right buyer was for us. Now, here's the thing, if our mindset was, we'll do the fundraise in 6 months, I think it'll just slow us down. It slows us down from building, the slide deck or the information, doing the pitching, doing the practice, building the beta testing, getting down all of our data and our research. I think would be, it would slow us down just considering that we had 6 months to find an investor. There's going to be a couple of things to consider. How much money do you have? If you're a startup and you don't have any money, it's going to be a challenge, right? So you would need to sort of think about how sustainable are we to get to beta, where we can find an investor to invest in the company. Like that's one of the first things you're going to have to think about. For us, it's not so bad. We already have a company over here that's successful, that generates positive revenue and deal flow. So, we can go longer when it comes to building a prototype of the product that we can take to a demo, right? I decided not to do that. I wanted to run super fast at it and break a whole bunch of stuff and then just get it done. So I want to have everything squared away by the end of 2025. Even the recruitment process has commenced and we're starting to see that first engineer come on board. And we're going to build a little office here in our office that we've set aside to build a team of maybe 6 technical people to start the project and build all these AI products. So that's what we're going to do. I think it's a 3-month campaign. For you, it could be a 3 to 6 month campaign, or it could be a 12-month campaign. You just really have to look at the key criteria for you personally, and everyone's sort of different. So if you have a lot of revenue, you can take your time with it. If you have to, this is a side hustle, and you're working a 9 to 5, well, of course, it's going to take longer, so your time horizon will be longer. I think if you're super under the pump, you may make mistakes, and it might just take you longer to get there. I'm a big fan of running fast and breaking things. I'm also a big fan of only break the things that don't matter long term, right? So, go slow on the things that really matter. And on the things that don't, when you need to get to a solution, you can run fast and break those things. So that's what I'd be super cautious of.